Welcome to LANDR Sampler. In this video, I'm going to show you how to load your sounds into Sampler, walk you through the interface and the functionality, and get to the core of why this plugin is the only sampler you'll ever need. Let's get started. When you first open LANDR Sampler as an instrument plugin in your DAW, you'll be prompted with a screen to load your samples. You can always get back to the screen by hitting the Settings cog, going to Settings, and then you'll see all of the sample locations. You can add a location by hitting the button Add Location, then navigate to where the samples are on your computer. So I'll hit Samples and Open. Then Sampler will perform an audio analysis along with the metadata of the file names to categorize your samples. Once you have your samples loaded in, head back to the main screen and click Load Samples. This will map a set of samples across the keyboard which are instantly playable. If you're looking to work with something more specific, you can always manually import samples by hitting the plus button up here, or drag them in from your DAW's file browser, or your file manager, or even LANDR Samples. If you find samples that you want to work with and refresh the rest of the loaded samples, you can always hit the lock button above each key. So for example, if I like this sample, I'll hit the lock button, and how about this one? Then I'll click Load Samples, and you'll notice the rest of the samples change around those locked notes. There's my sample, and then these ones are now different. Alternatively, you can also press this auto lock button, which will lock any played MIDI notes. So I can start to play these notes, and then you'll see the lock button appear above the note. This is great for auditioning samples that you'd like to work with. The real power of LANDR Sampler happens when you start using the advanced filters. So you can choose different sample types, so loop, one shot, or both, different sample lengths, so something longer, something shorter, as well as different categories. So for example, if I just want drums, I can hit drums, click Load Samples, and then I have different drum sounds mapped on the keyboard. If I want to hone in on something more specific, I can use the text search. So for example, I have shaker, and it's found 94 results, and then I can hit Load Samples, and I only have shaker sound. Finally, if you want to choose from specific locations, you can do so here. So I have a single sample pack loaded in, and I can load that entire sample pack across my keyboard. So I'll just reset the filters and hit Load Samples. Another powerful feature of LANDR Sampler is that it'll automatically normalize, pitch lock, time stretch, and auto-find the sample start times on any of the samples loaded in, making them instantly playable together and with your session. You can change the key of your session at the top right of the plugin, and you can change those settings here in the Settings tab. Go to Preferences, and you'll find the toggles here. So some of them are enabled by default, while others are not. There are 3 modes in LANDR Sampler to work with the sounds you load in: Normal Mode, Chromatic Mode, and Slice Mode, and you'll see them at the bottom of the keyboard here. Normal Mode is simply playing back the loaded samples, and you'll see that loops are marked with a dot, and then one shots without. There are also 3 playback modes. We have Normal Playback, One Shot, and Loop. And you'll see certain parameters change depending on the playback that you have just under the audio display here. In One Shot mode, you can set the sample start and end times in the sample display here, as well as the fade in and fade out. So if I want the sample to fade in, I can raise that. This is perfect for short and plucky sounds. If we head over to Normal Mode, you'll see those same start and end times, along with ADSR replacing the fade in and fade out. Finally, in Loop Mode, you have the start and end times along with the loop start and end times. So I can set those here. If I press the key, the sample will start playing at the start time, then loop between the loop brackets. So I'll try to set a loop here. I'll hit that. And you can hear it's not quite in time. If I want to get more granular, I can always zoom in by going like this or by scrolling with my mouse. So I'll just try to grade right into those transients there. One of the coolest things about this mode is setting the duration of the loop, so I can set it to my DAW session. If I want it to last for maybe 4 bars, I can go like that. It's a bit slow, maybe 1 bar. And that's already synced with my DAW's tempo. And if you'd like your loops to play in sync with one another and along with your session, just hit that magic button and it's going to auto-align all of the loops. So it doesn't matter when I'm pressing these keys, the samples will be auto-aligned. Life, transposition, velocity, and volume are all parameters that stay the same no matter what playback mode you use. Life adds subtle modulation to the sample when it's played back. While velocity sets the sensitivity of the velocity of the sample when you hit the key on your MIDI controller. Then volume is the overall volume of the sample. It's important to note that when you adjust these parameters, it is per sample. So if I go here, you'll see the transposition is different. But if you want to adjust these globally, you can just hold Shift and then drag up, and then you'll see that applied to each sample. If you stumble upon a sample that you like, you can just hit the favorite button here, and you can use that as a filter in the future. So that's a favorite. If I go to advanced filters, I can use that as a filter, and you'll see that result is there. Alternatively, you can hit the randomize button, and Sampler will find a similar sample in its place. So it's like a hi-hat sound. It's focusing on cymbals here. To use Chromatic Mode, click on a sample that you'd like to work with, and then hit the piano for Chromatic Mode. So I'll just cycle through some of these. So that could be used as like, a keyboard sample. So I'm actually going to zoom in here and set these locators to make it a bit short and see what that sounds like. So it's kind of like a cool keyboard sound now. I can always go back to normal mode, select a different sound, and then bring it back, or I can go over here and choose an arrow here and scroll through the loaded samples. Finally, to work in slice mode, you just select the sample you'd like to work with in normal mode, similar to Chromatic Mode that we just worked with, and then you hit the scissors button here. You'll see that Sampler already sliced it up for me by sensitivity, so I can go ahead and play. Really cool. So I can adjust the sensitivity dial here, and it's going to slice it more or less. But I can also slice it by division, which syncs up with my DAW's BPM, so I can choose from a time division here. So let's say I want it to be 1 bar. Or I can do it by equal parts, so I'll just chop it by equal parts. And I can set the number of parts here by dragging up and down. Now it's cool to note that you can actually set the start and end times here. So if I just want to hone in on this section of the sample, it's going to auto slice it again depending on what I'm using. If you're finding that a specific chop isn't quite where you want it to be, you can always zoom into the waveform and adjust any of the locators like this. And if you're hearing any clicks or pops, just hit the edit button, and then you can adjust the crossfade here, and that should eliminate them. So far we've been working in the wave editor in the main window, but if you click on the effects tab or the sequencer tab, you'll find 6 built-in effects along with a 5-lane sequencer. Let's start with the effects first. So you have filter, chorus, delay, bit crusher, distortion, and reverb, and you can see you can toggle these on or off by just clicking the name. Then at the bottom, you have different effect types based on each effect, and you can just cycle through those by clicking. On the x-axis, on all of the effects except for the filter, you have the mix. Then on the y-axis, you have a stylistic effect like depth for chorus or time for delay. On the filter, you have on the x-axis the frequency, and then the y-axis the resonance. Now you can mix these in by dragging this knob up or down, but it's important to note that all of these effects are all applied to each single sample. So you'll see I have these all on for this sample, but if I go to this sample, there are no effects on, so I can have a whole different effects chain. But if you want to apply these globally, just hit the main effects and this will let you apply an effects chain to all of the loaded samples. In the Sequencer tab, you'll find the 5-lane 64-step sequencer, perfect for building up an idea with the samples that you've loaded in. This can range from a unique percussion loop to a sequenced chopped vocal. The first thing you'll want to do is set the number of steps on each lane that you're working with. So the default's by 16, but if you want to set more, you can do that. Just drag it up. And you can cycle through to the other steps by just clicking this button here. The kick lane can be used to lay down a simple groove to get an idea going. All you have to do is click in the sounds here, select a note, and press play. If you want Sampler to sync with your session, so you can hear my metronome's on, but it's not in sync, now let's start working with the other lanes. So I have a simple 4 on the floor kick drum. I can go to lane 1, and I can start dragging in samples from my keyboard. So I'll have this here. Another way to do this is to just click one of the buttons, and you can choose the sample by dragging it up here, so you can kind of preview it before it goes in. And if you want to record an idea in real time, you can just hit the record button and just play them in. You can also generate random ideas by hitting the generate button, which will randomize the velocities as well as the note. If you want to make it a bit less busy, you can just increase the space and you get a cool rhythm going. If you want to change the notes altogether, you can hold Shift and drag so that it'll go up the keyboard. And if I want to bring the velocities down globally, I can do the same. And of course, I can add some swing. If you have specific notes in an idea that you want to keep and generate around it, you can always double click. Let's say I want to keep these ones. And then generate some different notes around it. I can do that. It's a really cool way to come up with a unique idea. If you want to clear a sequence, just hit the X, and you can mute and solo the different lanes. Any changes that you make to the main window, the effects or sequencer tabs can be saved as presets to come back to later. So for example, let's say I really like these samples I've loaded in. I've kind of messed with them a little bit. I can save them as a preset by clicking this disk, and you'll see a random name be given to it. I can rename it here, and then just load the plugin again and come back to those same samples. So the same thing can be done with the effects tab and the sequencer tab. Let's say I really like this sequence that I just generated. I can hit the disk and it'll save it there. Going into the effects tabs, same thing. I can create an effects chain. Let's say I really like it, and I can save it there. Finally, there are many ways to export what you've created in LANDR Sampler, from chopped to stretched sounds to full sequences. Obviously, Sampler is an instrument plugin, so whatever MIDI you program on the associated channel can be played back or printed, but you can just drag and drop the WAV file from Sampler into your timeline. So I can go like this, and that's the modified sample right in my session. I can also hit export, and I can choose to drag and drop the sample with or without the effects, and I can also save it to my hard drive. If you want to drag and drop a sample without any modifications, you can just hold Shift and drag. And from the sequencer tab, you're able to choose from audio or MIDI. You can set the length of the sequence and the effects as well. So I can just drag the sequence right into my DAW, and you'll see the full loop there. And that's it. I hope this video helps you understand what's possible with LANDR Sampler. It's an incredibly powerful tool that's perfect for generating unique ideas with all of your sounds. I'll catch you in the next one.